I said, upon what particular subject? He said, oh, he is the author of the Declaration of our American Independence, and yet Mr. Jefferson wrote, all men are created equal, that they are engaged indeed with certain inalienable rights, that among these are, well, you know the rest. And I said, yes, he did. He did write that as author of the Declaration, I will avow. But lad, I wish you to know something. And he proceeded to interrupt me, and yet he is the holder of many, many. You are reading your newspapers. Yes, lad, he is. He certainly is. I can tell you that I know Mr. Jefferson. I can tell you that when he was elected to his very first public office and took his seat as a Burgess in the old Virginia House of Burgesses the spring of 1769, his first effort in that ancient body was to stand and call for permission to begin a debate towards ending the importation of slaves, and he was immediately silenced, asked to be seated without further comment, the presumptuous youth from the wilderness. Oh, that did not deter him, lad, for I can tell you within a year he stood to defend a slave in the court of justice opposite the old House of Burgesses in the capital in Williamsburg. And there he offers his opinion upon slavery, the abomination of man's history, that as God is a just God, he cannot but abhor the institution of slavery, and that we must begin to tremble for our future in recognition that God's justice will not sleep forever. Oh, no, I was going to proceed to make other statements, and yet he said, oh, yes, but Mr. Jefferson is the president. Why does he not set an example and free his slaves? I said, well, lad, I am the owner of slaves, and I can answer you that directly because Mr. Jefferson would be breaking the law, and furthermore, he is greatly in debt. His slaves are not his own people. They are the property of his creditors. He has not that liberty, and nor will he attend to it, simply to satisfy his creditors. And furthermore, lad, may I make mention that Mr. Jefferson has freely admitted oft times that as the author of the Declaration of our American Independence, that there is not one new or original thought in the Declaration. All of it has been written before, has been argued and debated before, and you may find it in the elementary books of public right. The works of Aristotle, the works of Cicero, the works of Algernon Sidney, let alone Mr. John Locke. What Jefferson, as one of the 5 members of the committee appointed by President Hancock, attempted to do as the author in representing the committee was simply to free the lofty sophisms of these ancient authors and their works and to explain it all in clear and simple terms so that everybody might understand it, and to place before the world the common sense of the matter, which is simply that the mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their backs, nor a few booted and spurred, ready to ride him by their own particular political devices or by the grace of their own particular God. Mr. Jefferson wrote in the Declaration that man is more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. But lad, as a student of history, you would know that many times in human history there comes that day when he can bear no more. And how well we know that day arrived for us 31 years ago. And we showed the rest of the world that man has a natural right to burst forth from the chains that have bound him, to assume the reins of self-government. And then I provided him an addendum. I was astonished by his remark. I said, lad, Mr. Jefferson did, however, provide a particular alteration to the wisdom of these sages, particularly to Mr. John Locke and what he wrote. For it was Mr. Locke who wrote, all men are created equal. It was Mr. Locke who wrote that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and... No, that is what I wrote. And I'm delighted to hear you've read so well in that regard. No, the lad knew well what Mr. Locke had written, that Mr. Locke wrote, amongst our inalienable rights are life, liberty, and property. As Shakespeare would say, there's the rub. Oh, not a one of us can deny the right to property. That is a natural right, is it not? The right to acquire property, wealth, influence, to protect and defend the property, transfer the property as you should choose. That is a foundation of the civilizing of man, the rights of man. And yet, citizens, we know in our heart and our conscience that there have been times in human history where some of great property and influence have denied the equal opportunity of their fellow man to attend to the same. We know that there have been times in human history where some of great property and influence have denied equal and exact justice to their fellow man. Not a one of us can deny that we have inherited and brought forth into what the Romans would certainly call novus ordo seclorum, a new world order, the onerous element of property in the form of our fellow man shackled as a unit thereof. No, I proceeded to tell him Mr. Jefferson's alteration was purposeful. The pursuit of happiness is indeed a natural right. Oh, not as the Federalists continue to attack him, that liberty may become license. The Federalists know well that Mr. Jefferson's reference to the pursuit of happiness is simply Aristotle's reference to that which will be found down the pathway of virtue. That when an individual, when a people, when a nation pursues the pathway of virtue to do what they know in their heart and their conscience is just and right for all men, that they will find a greater happiness and satisfaction when it is time for them to shed their mortal coil than be found down any pathway of vice or corruption. I said, lad, if you will, I think that you are a remarkable example of an American citizen. And if you will, I should like to tell you that theocracy that Mr. Jefferson purports is the foundation of the success of these last 31 years, and you know he knew, for he replied immediately, oh, Mr. Jefferson says frequently that we are a meritocracy. The first people in the history of man to establish a nation based upon merit. The right of every individual to pursue their talent, their God-given talents to each and every one different from another, given to us to pursue through common sense and reason for the improvement of our life and our condition, and at the same time to be of use to society. I said, lad, please make an effort to visit Mr. Jefferson in the President's house. Oh, simply go up and knock on the front door, for oftentimes it will be Mr. Jefferson who will greet you. Oh, and he will not provide you any courtly, monarchical bow, as was prevalent during past administrations. No, Mr. Jefferson will extend his hand to greet you as he has always known the greeting of the Aborigines, who extend their hand for welcome and peace to their fellow man. And you will not find Mr. Jefferson so formally dressed as I am. No, he usually dresses for his own personal comfort. And therefore you will usually find him attired in his bed slippers, his bedrobe, his bed cap, a book in one hand, spectacles in another, and his pet mockingbird, Richard, upon his shoulders, who will greet you as well. Well, citizens, I never did find out the name of this young lad, nor do I think he ever knew who I was. But I can assure you this, I look forward this last year as Chief Magistrate of our nation to greet him in the President's house, and if not, that he might greet my successor, who I hope will welcome him in as an American citizen and engage him upon those principles over which we fought a revolution, and to remind him it will not be the last time. For these are principles over which man has argued long and hard, and they are to purport that freedom is not free. It requires an eternal vigilance. Well, I thank you for this opportunity to offer my opinion, but I'm somewhat diverged from my promise to seek your questions and your opinions and concerns. So, as you provided me the floor, I wish the floor to be yours, and I apologize if I have been somewhat errant or overly discourseful today, or maybe somewhat feeble in my opinions.